Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
Great, thank you. Looking forward to today's webinar.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Fiona. So for those who haven't been part of a Climate Action for Associations critical conversation before, we're doing this today actually as part of Associations Week 2021, which is exciting. So we hope that this event will be really useful to associations tuning in from all around the world. Today I welcome part of the critical conversation, Fiona Pelham, who is CEO of Positive Impact Events and chair of ISO 2012-1, and I'm sure she's going to explain, Fiona, what that means in due course. But I wanted to kick off today's conversation, Fiona, with I guess with the transition and the return of live events as well from the digital and hybrid that we've been seeing, and especially with COP26 on the horizon, what are the things that associations can do around their events?
Yeah, that's a great question and a really important question. So the world's attention is moving to COP26, and that's all about our carbon emissions, and it's all about creating commitments and then achieving those commitments. And I want to tell you a bit about what's been happening in the event sector around that and what that could mean for association events. And I'd like to introduce that by showing you a short animation that we created earlier this year. So Sophie, if I could ask you to go to the web page and turn the animation on. In November 2021, the world will come together in the UK for the COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and the event that many believe will be the world's last chance to get runaway climate change under control. In the run-up to COP26, the UK is working with every nation to reach agreement on how to tackle climate change. The event sector is also in action, and that makes sense because the UN Climate Change Conference is an event. By COP26, the event sector could have a carbon target and a reduction plan. How? UNFCCC, the UN climate change body, could engage with the event sector and get their input on what a sector carbon target could be, and hear about existing initiatives which could help the sector achieve that carbon target. Obviously, the more of the sector who already have a target and who are already in action, the easier it will be to create a climate action plan for events. That is why not-for-profit Positive Impact are launching the Road to COP26 Event Sector Transformation, in collaboration with UNFCCC and SME Climate Hub, so that at least 1,000 event businesses will receive tailored resources so that they can make a commitment to a carbon reduction target and be in action to achieve it. This engagement programme is specifically suitable for small to medium enterprises who do not already have a carbon target, may be overwhelmed after a challenging year of COVID restrictions, but have a desire to build back better and are willing to spend a few hours a month taking action. COP26 is an event with the potential to impact the world. The Road to COP26 Event Sector Transformation is an opportunity for the event supply chain who will make COP26 possible to show the world the importance of events and demonstrate leadership in transforming to a low carbon and sustainable sector. Thank you, Sophie. That's great. So, what is that initiative? That initiative is for anyone running an event, that includes associations, to make a net zero commitment as part of the UN Race to Zero. And when that commitment is made, the people making the commitment will receive free resources from the SME Climate Hub and the UN Race to Zero to support them achieve that target. The end goal we would love to see is a sector-wide target. So every time you have an event, whether it's a sport event, a business event, an association event, the whole sector, the whole supply chain is working towards the same net zero target by 2030, 2040, or 2050. Yeah, so Ali, what questions do you have around that? Because the first time you see that campaign, I think there's a lot of questions that probably come up.
There's a lot of information there, sure, and I guess associations, events are a core part of every single membership organisation's value proposition. It's obviously the way they engage with their members, inform and educate, etc. How applicable is it? Because I can see you transitioning the events industry as a whole. How do you see associations fitting into that per se?
Associations have a vital role because they use the event supply chain. So if you have an association that is having an event next week, a face-to-face event or a hybrid event, this week they could send an email to their supply chain, their venue, their caterer, their production company, and say, we would like you to make this net zero commitment. And as well as asking something of their suppliers, they're also helping them, because by directing them to this commitment, their suppliers will receive resources tailored for the event sector. So they shouldn't feel like it's an onerous task they're asking them to do. They're actually helping their supply chain future-proof themselves and gain the resources they need to be a good business in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so the associations that are part of the Climate Action for Associations Collective are starting to really explore how the events that they run, how they can measure and report on the events they're running, and how that fits into their scopes calculations, their scopes emissions. So how do you define? Can we actually look at what makes an event sustainable, and what are the things associations really need to focus on? I know you've talked about supply chain, but specifically, could you break it down for us, please, Fiona?
Yeah, so there is a lot in that question. First of all, events are usually a business's scope 3 emissions. So we can see from the behavior within the event sector that scope 3, it's the last area you look at. So it hasn't had the spotlight on it a lot so far. The question you ask is what should happen, and one of the traps that the event supply chain falls into is wanting to almost have a checklist of, we do X, Y, and Z for you. Now, your association listeners will know that one association event is not the same as another association event. They're not all held in the same country. There's not all the same number of people going. So it is dangerous for the supply chain to fall into we have a checklist of 50 steps that we will do, because it forgets the uniqueness of every event. Having said that, we are becoming more and more aware as a society of what causes carbon emissions. So travel, energy use, food production, but then there's the unique elements of an event, such as giveaways or activities that you might do on site. And that's why the Road to COP initiative that the event supply chain can sign up to and make a net zero carbon commitment is really important, because it takes the 6 steps that the UN is following to achieve a carbon target. So making a commitment, measuring, having a strategy, looking at your own emissions, looking at your suppliers' emissions, and then communicating about it. It takes those 6 steps and then tailors them for the event sector.
Fantastic. And in terms of the associations that are part of the collective are increasingly looking at and trying to decide between live and digital, and obviously at the moment making some really tough decisions, largely impacted obviously by COVID and the pandemic. As part of this initiative, do you also look at digital events and
Yeah.
the net zero or the carbon footprint of those initiatives?
Absolutely. So the understanding of what an event is really changing. And actually, last year during COVID, we ran a campaign around the future of human connection. So how do we connect online? What are our brains doing that's different from being face to face? And that's a bigger conversation. At the moment, the world is very focused on carbon with COP26 on the horizon. So if we look at human connection from a carbon perspective, it all boils down to measurement. And the reality is we haven't been measuring so far what the impact is when we're all virtual versus what the impact is when we are face to face. And if the event sector all worked to a carbon commitment, we would all then be measuring, and that would influence our behavior and our choices. Now, going into 2022, we are going to be working with the event sector to go beyond the carbon conversation and start talking about human rights and impact assessment. And that's when you start to look at, okay, the role of being face to face, there are some impacts it creates that maybe we need in the world that's worth that use of carbon. But we're not at that stage to be having that conversation yet, because one, the supply chain hasn't made a commitment to be net zero, and they're not reporting on it, and two, they're not measuring. And I just want to go back to that reporting piece, because with every sector, there's a risk of greenwash. And that's when somebody will say, yes, I commit to be net zero, and I promise I'll put it on my website every year how we're doing. And then they maybe forget about it until a year later. Now, the Road to COP initiative that we've launched is with the SME Climate Hub, who are part of the UN Race to Zero. This means that when people make their commitment, they then have to report on it every 18 months as part of the UN Race to Zero. So for your association members that want to really deal with this challenge of carbon and doing the right thing, they should be asking their supply chain to make a commitment, but then also looking at who the commitment is with, and is it with a UN body? Otherwise, it could just be a commitment that's on their website that they conveniently forget about in a year's time.
It's not just the supply chain that they're asked to make a commitment. The associations can make a commitment themselves. Is that correct?
Well, I would hope everyone is making a commitment, and the way that the UN Race to Zero and the UN works is by sector. So the initiative that we're talking about today, the Road to COP for the event sector, is the only way the event supply chain can make a commitment where they'll be recognised as being part of the event supply chain. So the associations can definitely make a commitment through the general Race to Zero portal. And I know that, Ali, we've sent a joint letter out to a number of the event sector associations this week, asking them to do that, because the event associations are very good at saying to their members, we think you should do this, or we think you should do that. And we've sent them this letter to say, well, have you made a net zero commitment? Because that's really the first step.
That's right. I think associations definitely have a role to play in leading the sectors or the professions that they represent, of course, but them taking strong leadership internally, getting their own house in order, is just as critical. So yeah, no, completely agree.
It is, and there's a challenging piece to the association world as well, in that you often have a committee, a volunteer board, and you also have to look at the business, how the business runs for the association. So where is the income coming? And within the event sector, tackling climate change and having carbon targets is challenging to some of the business models. And some of those companies may be on boards of associations, and it may not be convenient for them and their business model to be going towards a net zero carbon target very quickly. They may be using their voice to say, actually, let's do it a bit more slowly. So I think in the future, associations have a governance piece to be looking at, which is who is sitting on the board, what are their business models around the future world we're looking at. Could it be that their business model wants change more slowly than the world actually needs it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think governance plays a massive part in associations' transition to net zero. I think it's quite interesting. You touched on a lot there, Fiona. Standards. What about formal standards? Because you've said that there aren't any as such. Tell us about ISO.
Yes, if I've said there aren't any, then I misspoke, because there is one. There is an international standard, ISO 2012-1. So ISO standards are created because every country in the world's government is part of the ISO network, International Standards Organization network. And together, standards start at a country level and then they're proposed internationally. And it's standards that take the world towards things they need. So it could be more security or safety or quality. So ISO 2012-1 was launched in 2012. It was inspired by London hosting the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And the organisers of the London Olympics and Paralympics said to the British standards body, how can we prove that at every decision point we've considered sustainability? And they said, well, you are looking at your way of working, your process. That's a management system standard. So let's create a management system standard for the event sector. That began in the UK. There were then over 30 countries involved on as it was created as an ISO. And that standard is coming up for review next year, but it has been used around the world as a way of working so that sustainability is considered at every decision point.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, Fiona. Can we talk about some specifics? Because we're hearing from associations, you're absolutely right, blending that commercial with sustainable and carbon neutrality is increasingly going to become an issue, particularly as associations start to consider Scope 3 and all the supply chain around that. What we're already hearing is, paraphrasing, well, we can't go completely paperless. We still have to hand out our X at an event because that's what members want. Or, oh goodness me, we could never have a plant-based offer only at an event because our members wouldn't come or our delegates wouldn't be attracted to the event. Is that true? Is that fear-based decision making?
Yeah, I've been working in this area for over 15 years, and I will never say, here are the top 10 things you need to do, because I know that that opens the door to those fear-based conversations, to those people who really love a meat menu. Maybe they're the Association of Cattle Ranchers, and to not have meat on their menu would be a really big deal. So I will never give a specific 10-point list. Instead, I would always point people towards using ISO 2012-1, because when you use the standard, you identify what are the key challenges that you are facing, and then you make your objectives from there. Now, what I have enjoyed over the last 12 or so months is the increasing evidence of the next generation and what their expectations are. I think in the UK, in the Guardian news, there was a report recently of over 75% of 24-year-olds are choosing jobs that make a difference, especially around climate change, because they feel, why not? What would I do otherwise? I have to do this. And I think that is the future for associations and for events. They are our future customers, and they're already showing what they expect and what they want. They're showing that they're choosing not to travel for events. They're very technologically savvy. They can connect with each other in ways that previous generations never learnt to. So no matter what our current members think, no matter what we've always done, that's what the future is. And every business should look to what the future customer wants.
Yeah, and associations are obviously all looking at the future of their professions and industries and supporting the leaders of tomorrow.
Exactly.
So exactly. Engaging with those audiences in the right way and offering the right style of event or information with the right message is key.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there will be some associations that will show leadership here, and that will make their members a little bit uncomfortable because it's new, but the members will trust them and will understand this is what's needed for the future. And then there will be other associations that won't go near this at all.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of associations, obviously thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands around the world, all running events every day, from tiny events, roundtables, all the way up to thousands of delegates going through major exhibition halls with stand builds and good knows what else. Some of these events are also run by suppliers to the associations, either the big events production company, events build company, publishers. So are those organizations part of your existing initiative?
Yeah, they should be. So everyone who you've just mentioned should, in the world of shoulds, should have a net zero carbon commitment through our initiative, because that means it's being captured by the UN and they're reporting back to the UN, and the UN is recognizing the event sector. They have not all got that yet. So this is why it's good to collaborate with you and your association community so that they can encourage their supply chain to make this commitment.
So some of the biggest questions that we're facing from associations is and around this the events piece. So I'm really thrilled that we're collaborating or starting our journey of collaboration with you, because I feel like it's a huge opportunity for change, and associations play a massive role in driving and well, mobilizing their delegates, their supply chain, and obviously their members in terms of engaging with the events as well.
And so it's yeah, and it's great that you have the community of the leaders of associations that know they want to take action in this area, because we'll be able to support them with resources so that they can be implementing ISO 2012-1, so that it can have a supply chain with a net zero carbon target. And something I've learned over the years is it isn't about everybody going in that direction, but it's about leaders going in that direction, and other people will follow. So I'm excited with what we can do to support the leading associations.
Yeah, no, we're definitely championing this, because it's such a huge part of their offer and the way that they drive member value. But the governance part that you've already discussed is key. It needs to be understood from a board, council, volunteer, member level to drive those decisions initially anyway.
Yes, and I know we've mentioned this before, but I chaired a big association within the event sector, which gave me an understanding of the governance and the political challenges within an association. And one of the things I'm excited about is a growing number of associations around sustainability initiatives, because their understanding of what good governance means to support sustainability will be very different from existing old associations whose membership might not reflect an understanding of sustainability. And I think the future lies with those forward-thinking associations.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the I think what we've seen, particularly in the last year or so, with the enforced home working and running of events digitally, is a massive shift in innovation and creativity by and crisis management as well, by associations who've managed to pivot their events offer practically overnight. So now they're starting to think, okay, returning back to live events, let's just step this out a little bit. Let's try things that we haven't done before. Let's deliver the same, necessarily the similar content, but in a different way. How can they really explore how to innovate through their events?
And I think once there is a carbon target and commitment in place and measurements going for that, that's almost like step one. And then what's the innovation around that? So what's the impact of bringing people together? What's the gender balance? What's the diversity? What's the equal access to the content? But without having that carbon commitment made at a UN level and reported at the UN level, it's ignoring the biggest elephant in the room. So you couldn't say, oh, our association event is vital because it brings communities together. They have the chance to meet, they have the chance to innovate. You can't say that unless you already have the foundation of, and we've made a net zero carbon commitment, because the whole world needs that net zero carbon commitment. You can't have an excuse that we need to just be face to face now.
Could an association make that commitment across its entire suite of events? I'll give you an example. One association we work very closely with them have 400 events that they run a year, from their flagship annual expos and one-day conferences all the way through to volunteer-led networking events out in regions. How can an association make sure that every single event falls part of the net zero challenge, I guess?
Well, the first thing is the association would join the UN Race to Zero as an association. So that might be on a country level or a sector level. Then the next thing is that they would ask their event supply chain. So probably their head of events would, every time they do an event, ask the supply chain to join the net zero carbon commitment initiative that we're running. So again, the suppliers then become part of the Race to Zero. And then I would say they should put it in their contracts. So anything to do with paying money, it should be the supplier has to be part of the UN Race to Zero. And they could also ask for measurements.
Yeah.
If
so
they wanted
getting tougher on procurement and the process behind that. Yeah,
definitely. And this is where it's important that it's not just their suppliers have made a net zero carbon commitment, because anyone can say, I make a commitment. But if it's part of the UN Race to Zero, they have to report on it. So if the association doesn't want to collect data, they can just say, we want all of our suppliers to have joined the UN Race to Zero, because they'll know they have to give data in to the UN Race to Zero.
Yeah. And CAFA itself is an accelerator, global accelerator of the UN-backed Race to Zero, and we're encouraging all associations to be accelerators in their own right. Great. So it truly fits together, and this is a massive part of that jigsaw. So I'm really excited to be talking to you, Fiona.
Yeah, great.
Fantastic. So I guess we could wrap up by talking a little bit more around the events that we have planned on the 20th of October. I can't believe we're October already. But we're just going to go into a little bit more detail, I think, around this area.
So the 20th of October is a big day of events that we are doing as part of our UN Race to Zero. We have delivered a series of 6 events, and on October the 20th, as well as our roundtable with you, the Climate Action for associations, we'll be delivering roundtables with a number of UN partners as part of the lead up to COP26. So it would be great to talk in more detail with you. And what are you looking forward to from that, Alison?
I'm looking forward to be part of a much broader collective and seeing exactly what changes are really being made, and listening and hearing from other organisations and associations that are part of your ecosystem as well. I think it's really cool, and the work that you're doing is fantastic. And we're also talking and exploring around how we can develop bespoke solutions for associations, specifically to help them with their individual needs that they have around this area as well, which I'm really excited about.
Yes, that's right. We've got some great education which can be tailored for the association marketplace. So yes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Fiona. Really enjoyed speaking to you today. Why don't we put in the chat for anyone that's listening your URL?
Yes, that's a good idea.
And I can do the same from Climate Action for Associations. Really keen to obviously support. We support associations, large and small, every sector, every profession in their acceleration to net zero, working really closely with the Race to Zero team and the climate SME Climate Hub as well, and now with Positive Impact events. So it's super exciting.
Excellent.
Thanks again.
On our link there, that's the link to send to any of your event suppliers so that they can join the Race to Zero under the event title.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you.
Thanks for taking part, and happy Associations Week.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.